Hi, evening everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Sonalle for inviting me to come and speak. Apologies, Sonalle, for not responding to your emails. I've been out of the country and then not been very well, and so apologies for that, but thank you. I'm very inspired to see such a young woman, particularly from a minority, which is from a minority community, who's been able to put up an exhibition like this around domestic violence, because often the struggles of minority young women when they're looking in the arts, whether it's to do with acting, photography, whatever it is very difficult to go down into mainstream work for them, and there's a lot of racism they face, all sorts of barriers, and particularly if you're a woman there's far more barriers as well. And so well done, Sonalle, for setting this up, and it's great to see that you're able to put up this exhibition, and I'm hoping that there are many more to come. Some of the stuff that I've just read here echoes a lot of what the women that we help on a daily basis. We hear the same stories. I wasn't allowed to go out, I'm not allowed to speak to anyone, subjected to violence and abuse of horrific, in some circumstances, very horrific abuse. And in minority communities, it's very difficult for women to come out and speak about domestic violence. And what often happens is that if you do, then you're bringing shame and dishonour onto the family, and so therefore women are silenced. Domestic violence cuts across all races, all religions, and all class and cultures. So it's not just about one particular group. But what we've got to bear in mind is that in some communities there are further hurdles that women have to overcome, and that is the notions of shame and dishonour, and that is about how the community perceive women or how they assist women. And one of the things that we've kind of done over the last 30 years is bring to the forefront, through our campaigning work, issues of domestic violence in minority communities, and how difficult it's been for black and minority women to come out and talk about it. In the early years in the 70s, we did get a backlash from the Asian community saying we were washing dirty linen in public, and that we shouldn't talk about domestic violence. It's a family affair, it's closed, it's between the four walls of their home, and that you shouldn't be talking about this because the white communities will then begin to see us as barbaric communities. So, you know, we had to struggle against that and to say, no, this is an issue that goes on within our communities and we have to deal with it. Domestic violence is there, and we have to raise this awareness, and we have to allow women the right to choose how they want to live. So, so over the years we've been campaigning, making lots of changes. In 1982, or 92, we released a woman called Kiranjit Dalwalia who'd murdered her violent husband, and as a result of that work that we did over the years, it allowed many other women who were in prison for a similar offence to be released. And you know, that's the kind of changes we're making in law. We have made other changes. For instance, very recently we brought about the forced marriage bill, working with Lord Leicester on that, and that's coming to force now, allowing third-party intervention for third parties to gain injunctions to stop young women being forced into marriages, whether it's here or abroad. And it allows organisations like ours, or social services, or the police to do that. The other thing that we have been changing over the years, and it's a section of women that we tend to forget, and don't recognise the problems that they have, and it's women with immigration problems. So on the one hand we're fighting for rights for all women to have provision and to be helped, but on the other hand there are a section of women that are not being helped either by the state or by communities in some situations. And those women who are subject to immigration rules are also subject to no recourse to public funds, and that means they're not allowed to gain access to housing or benefits of any kind. And as a result, those women are stuck in a situation where they either tolerate the abuse or put up with abuse, or they face deportation if they leave their violent husbands or his family. So they're in a kind of a very difficult situation, because when women do decide to leave, where do they go? Sometimes they're sleeping in parks. Sometimes they end up with strangers. Then they're exploited sexually even further. Sometimes they end up with family members who economically exploit them as well. So it's very difficult for those women, and yet we're still campaigning to get the government to recognise that they've got to abolish the no recourse to public funds. They've got to allow these women the right to benefits in housing, the right to escape from domestic violence like all other women. And they should be allowed that whilst their application are pending in the Home Office for decisions. They should be given that right per se. And so that's the kind of campaigning thing that we're still doing. A lot of those women that I work with immigration problems, majority of them will have contemplated or attempted suicide at some point. And the horrificness of the way that these women are treated is just so bad. And even now I hear stories, and recently I've just helped a 19-year-old who was tied up and put in the garage. And because she was really scared, she wet herself. And when the family came back, they actually beat her up even further for wetting herself, and then hosed her down with a hose pipe, cold water. And this was like in January when it was snowing. So it's that kind of horrificness of violence and abuse, and that's the power these people have, because they're able to say, the police won't do anything to us. And if you say anything or go and try and get help, then we'll get you deported. You don't have a right to stay in this country. And with that fear, these women are silenced, and they're not able to gain any services or help. And one of the things that, helps is awareness raising around domestic violence, and supporting campaigns that we wage to change laws, to encourage the communities as well as the government to help these women to access services. And it's very difficult to help those women, particularly with immigration problems, because it's difficult to get them anywhere, any form of safe housing. And if we're talking about a country where they're fleeing to for safety or anything, safety is not what's offered to them. Some of them are escaping asylum from war-torn countries. Even they're not offered housing or money to support themselves, so where do they go? A lot of them are destitute, and they're walking around on the streets and get into prostitution, drug abuse, all sorts of things. So you're not just dealing with having to deal with their social issues, but other issues that they get involved in order to survive. And statistics have shown that Asian women between the age of 15 and 24 are twice more likely to commit suicide than the general public. So, it shows how minority women often don't have many choices, and the only choices that they do have sometimes is about committing suicide. And in some cases, women where they do stand out and they speak against their communities or what was happening to them, are faced with being murdered. And we've seen a lot of that recently, a spate of women who have been killed in the name of honour, that you've disgraced our honour and therefore we're entitled to kill you. So, a lot of that has been happening, and we've been trying to make changes through the government by making recommendations, by saying things need to change, particularly for this section of people. We need to be able to support them better whilst they have pending applications and things happening with their application for either divorce or immigration, whatever it is. They should be afforded that same help. I'm just going to stop there really, but to say that it's good to be able to raise these issues today, but I'm hoping that people go back and raise those issues as well, and support other campaigns in your areas that may be working around domestic violence, and particularly around the issue of immigration. Thank you for inviting me to speak again. Thank you.